that has always stuck with me in regards to, keep it entertaining, keep it engagement, keep it people focused. And it doesn't matter, right? Whether you're in the advertising industry or marketing industry or media industry, you're in the entertaining and human industry, right? Of drawing engagement and attention with people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the media industry shaping the future of data-driven advertising. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and this week I had the opportunity to sit down with Jesse Redniss, founder and CEO of Precise. Together, Jesse and I explore the current data privacy landscape and why it's critical that we prioritize the experience of how consumers engage with brands wishing to collect and use their data. Before we jump into that conversation, this is a reminder to hit that subscribe button to be alerted when new episodes of Identity Architects are available. But without any further delay, here's my chat with Jesse. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Jesse Redniss, founder and CEO of Precise. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
And thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited to dig more into your background, more into Precise. For anyone who doesn't know you, can you just give us a very quick introduction to yourself, but also to Precise?
Sure. So Jesse Redniss, how everyone's doing here. Father of four. That's, first and foremost, what I present myself as is I've got four boys. It's mayhem all the time. So it's pretty representative of my life, which is very frenetic and always on the cutting edge, I guess you could say. But my background, 25 years in the media entertainment space. I actually come out of a long tenure at NBC Universal. And then I launched my own incubator for a few years with a couple of great partners. And then at Warner Media for 5 years running innovation and data practices for the company. So in that time, I learned a lot around engagement with consumers, with audiences, storytelling, content creation, branded content, the power of insights and data to drive the creative process and cycle. And that's really what fuels me kind of every day. And that had led me into launching Precise, which is really a proof-based data and identity company that's looking to help reestablish the kind of currency of how publishers, consumers, brands, and marketers all balance on the power of data.
That's super interesting. Well, I've definitely got a lot of questions for you and a lot to pick your brains. But we'll start with our quickfire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Starting with, what is your earliest memory of advertising?
All right. Earliest memory of advertising, I would say, is as a little kid, watching cartoons and seeing the Freezy Freakies commercials in like the early 80s. And Ben, I'm not sure if you saw those or know what those are, but those are those gloves that you put on and they change colors and like little characters show up. And so that was, when I was watching Scooby-Doo and stuff as a kid, Rainbow Connection, those are the things that I remember as the earliest signs of advertising.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to look those up on YouTube.
Look those up. They're cool. I'll bring you a pair. Awesome. I'll bring you a pair.
There you go.
You hold your rosé with
it. Excellent. So take yourself back to those days, watching Scooby-Doo and that vibe. What did you want to be when you were younger?
Yeah. So this is funny. So I wanted to be Batman. Honestly, it was, that was my favorite show. I'd walk around my neighborhood in like my Batman underoos, and I had a Batman cape and t-shirt and mask. And I had my best friend was Robin. So I wanted to be Batman. That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good goal to set yourself. Clearly that didn't work out.
That didn't work out for me. Yeah, that didn't work.
What was your first job in either advertising or marketing?
Yeah, so I actually went the route of music. So I went to a conservatory of music for school and went deep into music production engineering. And I was always marketing, right? So you're always out there, marketing for your band to appear, going door to door to bars, putting up flyers, building an audience following. That for me was, not an official job, right? But when you're out there as a musician and you're trying to build an audience and a following, you're marketing the crap out of yourself.
Yeah.
And that was, the first foray really into marketing. I would say, after that, the first official job, I actually worked at an ad agency called Integrated Media Solutions, which was a DR ad agency. This is a few years after school. I did the whole startup boom and bust and tried to play in the music space during the Napster days. And then worked at Integrated Media Solutions, where I, started really diving into ad to sales ratios and digital targeting and advertising for a few brands in the DR space.
That's super interesting. What do you think it was about the advertising industry, therefore, that drew you in? And then what do you think keeps it in you? It keeps you in it, kind of all these years later.
Yeah, I would say, I figured out that, at the agency side, at the ad agency side, like I wasn't in love with it, right? I wasn't super passionate about it, but I love the math behind it, understanding, the audience and the targeting capabilities. And these are very early days of what creative worked for what different targets and audiences were we going after. And, we were working with brands like Cancer Treatment Centers of America and Bosley Hair Club for Men and Hooked on Phonics. So these are all kind of cause-based brands, but diving into turning the dials a bit for them to see real outcome. You felt good because you're actually impacting somebody's life. Cancer Treatment Centers for America and Hooked on Phonics, reading for kids. And so the more that we can show that the media is working from them through creative multivariant testing and different targeting of different audiences we're going after, that is the bug that I think got in me. And I took that into, I flipped from advertising and went into media, and went to USA Network. I'd never really even thought about going into media before, and they needed somebody in the digital space, somebody that knew and understood digital platforms and products and data and insights. I knew nothing about television, and I went in there kind of nonchalantly and interviewed, and I really took to it. I really loved what I was seeing and understanding on, you know promoting shows, right? And building
Mm,
community and experiences around content and storytelling. And so I used a lot of that advertising background, and applied it, directly into building community around some of the great shows at NBC Universal, and did it for a long time. And that has always stuck with me in regards to, keep it entertaining, keep it engagement, keep it people focused.
yeah.
And it doesn't matter, right? Whether you're in the advertising industry or marketing industry or media industry, you're in the entertaining and human industry, right? Of drawing engagement and attention with people.
Yeah, I love that. The human industry, that's such an interesting kind of way to look at what we do. And obviously, you've had kind of such an incredible career and you've been involved in so many different aspects of the industry and so many incredible brands and industries and companies. With all that experience, what advice would you give to someone that is maybe just starting out in their career in media, marketing, and advertising?
Yeah. I would say again, keep it focused on the people and the relationships, both the people that you engage with in the industry, more of
Yeah.
the B2B relationship side, as well as, keep your sights focused in on the end consumer, right? And the goals of what it is you're trying to deliver for them and with them. I think at the end of the day, this industry tends to focus on the big C. I call that capitalism, right?
Right.
And the little c, the consumer, often gets forgotten. They are the
Mm.
product. And so I think if you take a mindset where you start with consumer as the big C, then I think it'll really influence and catapult, the bigger C, the capital C, in a way that, can set you up for any industry at the end of the day. So when you're just starting off, keep that in mind, and keep those aspects as your kind of North Star as you navigate your career.
Yeah, I love that. I love keeping it very consumer centric. It's why I'm a big fan of talking about consumers, not users. I think users kind of makes it seem less of a close touch to the consumer. So the more we can
Yeah.
talk directly about the consumer, I think it's super important. A two-part question: what keeps you awake at night? So I guess what's the stress factor, and then what gets you up and motivated in the morning?
Yeah, I would say in many ways, kind of the same things, right? This industry is moving so fast right now, especially with the dawn of AI and AI
Mm,
applications and processes and systems being applied to how people think, move, iterate, build prototypes, and keeping up, right, with all of that acceleration is hard. And so I do find myself trying to educate as much as I possibly can. And I used to be able to sit down on the train and, consume for an hour on my way into the city and just boom, it's like, great. I feel a little bit caught up here. And I find it harder and harder to do that. The algorithms now are just spitting so much at you that it seems like the entire industry is moving so fast that you can't keep up. That
Yeah.
then, causes anxiety. Running a startup, and I've now been at it for 4 years now, that's the biggest thing, the anxiety of moving fast, right? And seeing around corners, and not letting other people's moves be a dissuading factor, right? In regards to, oh no, I know what my North Star is. And just because somebody else did this or somebody else did that does not mean that I can't still be successful and move. And it just, that keeps me up. That plus, my 4 kids,
Yeah.
keeps me up, right? But it's also a huge motivating factor, right? It's also
Yeah.
the thing that, I get up in the morning and my mind is racing and I finally get up out of bed. I'm like, okay, great. I kind of thought through things and have some clarity on what it is I want to say, what it is I want to get the team rallied behind for the day, the week, the month, or for the year. And every day to be able to wake up and do that. And be able to call colleagues and clients and share those ideas and those thoughts and see how it can be applied to what their goals are. It's exhilarating.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such an exciting way to look at the industry. You mentioned kind of how fast paced it is and things are constantly changing. And it's become an incredibly complex industry.
Yeah.
So how would you describe what you do within media and advertising to a 10-year-old?
Yeah. Luckily, I do have a 10-year-old in the house.
There
My
we go.
youngest son is 10. And he asked me that question a lot. And it used to be a lot easier, right? It used to be the like, oh, I'm working on the new Pokemon movie launch,
There you
and
go.
here's what we're doing. Right? Like, what do you think, Rigby? He's like, that's so cool. That was
Yeah.
an easy answer. But now it drives back towards making it something relatable for him. And so what I mean by that is I explained to him, I was like, hey, you know how on my birthday, Nike is actually sending me a happy birthday message and then, an offer to come in and get a discount for being a loyal brand fan and customer. He's like, yeah, totally. And he's like, and I get that too. I'm like, yep, you do. I was like, I help companies think through that and then take care of that information around what your birthday is, so that it benefits your relationship with Nike. And he's like, okay, I that's cool.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting way to think about, and again, and to humanize things back down to something a 10-year-old can understand. Because at the end of the day, when he's out there, credit card, social number out there running everywhere, it's going to be a very different world.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a great way to look at it. And as a sneakerhead, any reference to Nike resonates with me.
Yeah, totally.
You mentioned a love for music. So I'm super
Yeah.
interested to get your reaction to our final quickfire question because it's a personal favorite of mine. If there was a song that was a soundtrack to your life, what would it
Yeah.
be?
Yeah. Um, I would say that it would be "The Pretender" by Foo Fighters. And it's really, if you're not familiar with the song, it's really around, going against the status quo. It's about calling out people that wear masks all the time to blend in. The pretender, right? It's about being unconventional in the way that you're approaching things. Rage Against the Machine. And I think that, for me in my career and the way that I think and the way that I try to solve problems, I always try to swim upstream and think outside the box in regards to how I believe things should get done or can be solved. Um, the unconventional way of getting to the right outcome is kind of how I've built my entire career, and it's fun, right?
Mhm.
And I think that song in general, I think just encompasses a lot of what I stand for.
I think that's an amazing choice. We have a playlist on Spotify that we will now add that to. So if
All
anyone
right,
hasn't heard
cool.
it, they can go and listen to it and enjoy it. Let's dig a little deeper on you and on Precise in the industry. Let's talk about how the founding of Precise itself. What inspired you to found it, and how does your background in the media and technology and advertising industry influence how you approach data privacy from a Precise perspective?
Yeah, this is a great question. So Precise, Precise was only formed about a year ago. So the real origin story for me in the Precise journey actually comes from when I founded Consent with a few partners that I worked with at Warner Media. But the whole notion of consent really started back in 2018, 2019. I was at Warner Media at the time. I was running data strategy, working very collaboratively with the Xander team, with the AT&T team, and GDPR, started becoming a quote unquote impediment, right, to the business strategy and operations. And so, working across not just the ad sales strategy, but marketing and research and product, my background is really rooted in on, user experience, user products, how to actually, gain more data to, influence how we can do targetable advertising or better marketing or better product experiences. And so, my team, along with Stefano Kim, who is now, the chief sales strategy and operating officer over at Fox Ad Sales. We were tasked to basically come in and formulate a cross-company strategy on how we're going to approach GDPR and then the pending CCPA, which was coming into play in California in 2020. So we took a really collaborative approach in regards to understanding the business goals and objectives of all the different units. Obviously, AT&T with its mobility data as a lightning rod for regulation issues. Xander was fairly new in regards to its formation, but founded, with the auspices of leveraging all that quality first-party data from Warner Media and AT&T and mobility and insights and reach to launch a scaled advertising opportunity. And I think we're seeing it play out all over again with the move that T-Mobile and others are making here. And so at the end of the day, a lot of it was digging into the legal aspects of how do we set up our infrastructure, how do we continue to operate in a way that we're meeting all the minimal requirements of the law, and we started focusing in on what are the aspects of the best possible consumer experience so that we can gain more valuable signal from our consumers, from the people that are engaged with our content and on the cell phone services in ways where they were just not IP addresses and hashed emails,
Yeah.
right? And that really became the driving force, right? Behind like my mission and what I was looking to accomplish with keeping the entertainment and engagement and storytelling nature of what Warner Media and storytellers and content creators represent, and bringing that into how we drive a business strategy and outcome with the other components of the business. I left, Warner Media in 2021 and had this notion of there was no great product in the marketplace that did a phenomenal job of explaining the legal issues and the privacy issues with just handing over your email or enabling IP address to be tracked. And so I took a lot of my background and a lot of the partners I worked with at Warner Media and other places, and we launched Consent, to try to solve some of those problems and be a middleware between businesses and consumers to try to drive a lot of that transparency.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of ended it on transparency, because I think we all recognize that there is an incredibly important role of transparency around data collection with consumers.
Yeah.
How has the data privacy landscape evolved recently, and what role is Precise specifically playing in that transformation?
Yeah, I mean that's such a good question. It's also a very loaded question, right? So
Okay.
I think that the privacy landscape. When I talk privacy landscape, there's also like the marketing and data and identity and advertising industry and landscape as well. And those two things really go hand in hand. I think over the last 3 years, and I think at InfoSum you've seen it as well. There's been a massive transformation of the veneer pillow talk, right? Of the like, oh, we're privacy safe, and just people pretending, right, that privacy was important to them,
Mm,
yet they weren't really changing anything in the way that they were really operating. And I think we're now at that stage where over the last year, 18 months, there's been a massive shift. Right. And we're really starting to see and understand the movement by, the 4As and the ANA and even the IAB on the aspect of transparency and proof of provenance as a main driver. So it's not just saying like, hey, I'm privacy by design, or we're privacy safe, or privacy conscious, but it really is the now you have to prove it and back it
yeah.
up. So I think every company now is really thinking through, how am I going to do that? right? How am I really going to show the aspect of, no, I actually have the rights and the permissions to use the data in the ways that we're doing it. I actually have an infrastructure set up in which we're doing, zero movement approaches, federated collaboration, cross cloud, cross prem, whatever it may be. And you have to marry that then with the actual aspect of, did you really receive the data from consumer with all the right permissions with transparency attached to it? So, the aspect of dark patterns has always been something at the back of my mind when I was reading deep into like GDPR. What does explicit consent mean? What's a dark pattern? And that becoming a driving force behind the, all right, how do we look at the quality of the yes, of the opt-in?
Right.
And then how do we then score those types of things in a way that you can really point back to that proof of provenance, that permission layer to say, oh, it's not just an email. It's an email with a lot of great context and behavior and a real yes from the consumer. That's going to perform better, right, at the end of the day. And so did it come through a real transparent relationship with the consumer versus they bought an email list as a business and now all of a sudden they have an email to go activate against?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, consumer trust clearly plays a massive role in this, right? Part of the reason we want brands, media owners, and other companies to be more transparent is to build that consumer trust. Our CEO, Lauren Wetzel, is fond of saying that, trust can take years to build, but it takes seconds to lose. So we all recognize the importance of consumer trust. How is precise facilitating transparency between brands and consumers? And what role does consent play in strengthening those relationships rather than hindering them, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I think it all comes down to like that last mile, right? In which we really think about the experience layer. Like when you get the data
Mm,
from the end consumer, what was the mind state? What was their understanding of the relationship that they were entering into, right? And there's so much nuance in the law, all right, and what's going on in the rollout of like what's minimal viable yes or consent from a consumer to the point where it's like, oh, if you landed on a website and you're watching their video, then that's an intentional engagement. Therefore, you can grab all the data you want. And you're like,
right.
really? So there's a lot of aspect in regards to how do you actually build the experience layer so that it sits on top of your business strategy, which is yes, of course, as a business, you want to collect as much robust data as you can to not only fuel your products, but then to have the freedom and the ability to build businesses around that relationship with the end consumer. And so that experience layer is so important, right? In being able to just set the baseline aspect of great, you're logging in and here's the great content you're going to experience. And with your data, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z to your benefit. And here's what that means. And that can get translated into a lot of different, design thinking approaches and how that becomes a user experience so that it becomes something that's standardized and commonplace for the consumer to not just say like, oh crap, I've got to go read like 10, 20 lines of fine print and then a privacy policy that
Yeah.
99.9% of people never read. I want to know and understand what it is so that I have a trusted relationship with that brand. So that in the future, when I engage the brand Nike, which I think it does a great job of this, it's a passive thought. I don't have to actively dig deep and like read the fine print to understand like what is Nike really trying to get at here by asking me for this? Are they trying to trick me into saying yes to something? So that relationship is so important. And so I think there's that two-sided aspect of the business is the infrastructure and operations and federated collaboration. Yes, yes, yes. But then also all the data that then goes into those systems and infrastructure, that needs to be clean, right? That needs to be pure. That needs to have
Yeah.
the right permissions and have that right essence, right, of your fan, of your consumer in order for it to be powerful for you. And for us, we like to build the best user experiences and work with brands to help enable that type of relationship building that they have with their users and consumers. But then also how that then lives on in the data structure itself. Proof of provenance, data transparency labels attached to that signal that then goes everywhere. So no matter
Yeah.
when you try to, understand, where did this piece of data come from, under what context and with what permissions, everything has what's known as data lineage, right, and traceability attached to it. And that's what we're working to help establish, right? Not just with our clients, but we would love that to be, an industry standard in the way that we think about data is a currency. Now, how does
Yeah.
everyone agree on what that currency is made up of?
Yeah, and I think one of the driving factors around this is just how obviously there's a regulatory driving factor, the
Yeah.
regulations that require greater privacy consciousness, but also obviously consumer awareness. I think consumers have never been more aware of how their data is used for within the advertising industry. There's been documentaries on Netflix about this. I think as people have started to get access to ad tier layers on streaming services, that gives them a greater visibility. Okay, so there's a value exchange happening here
Yeah.
that allows me to access this content and therefore an understanding that that is their data. What is and how does Precise approach that education part? So educating consumers about their data rights, but then that value exchange that's involved in sharing that information.
Yeah. And that comes down to, again, that user experience, that design layer, right? How do you
Mm,
communicate these aspects to the consumer to the point where they understand the basics, right? Of the, hey, by turning on location sharing, you're enabling us to, right, target your exact location so that we can get you a map or get you directly into the store you're looking for, whatever it may be, or unlock a very hyper targeted local aspect. And then in plain language, like, along with that, we may use this information for providing you relevant, targeted, enhanced advertising offerings. You can opt out to that simply by swiping here or tapping this and
yeah.
making it at that transaction layer, right? And that's an important aspect where it's, the cookie apocalypse that happens along with the cookie banner apocalypse that really happened, I think, in GDPR and in Europe,
Yeah.
I think destroyed the user experience layer. So we didn't have a good opportunity to experiment with what works and why. What's the behavioral science behind what causes people to say yes? And
Yeah.
everyone reacts differently to value exchange opportunities and offers. Then what you may say is like, oh yeah, I respond to a 25% off offer, from Nike all the
There
time,
we go.
and I say, I'm like, 25%, I don't know if it's worth it. But then they turn around and show me like, oh, $15 off. Guess what? $15 and 25% to Nike are exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But they're drilling into the behavioral science of what gets me to say yes versus what gets you to say yes. And then you essentially use tools to do multivariant dynamic targeting, which then drives you into more of a consumer flow into a journey. And I think that's really important layer to understand as part of the privacy journey here, right? It's not just around IP addresses and hems and masking them and encrypting them and putting them into an infrastructure for operations and targeting. It has to start at the consumer touch point, right? And understanding that human behavior aspect of what causes somebody to give an affirmative, real intent yes, or a consent into having their data used. So we
Yeah.
we work with a lot of brands to help drive that, right? To drive that
Yeah.
strategy and that outcome with our products.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because it leads to something that I think what maybe we're getting at there is a concept that I came across in my pre-podcast research slash stalking, whatever you want to call it, for this episode, which was around this term performance privacy that I've seen you use in bylines and opinion pieces. Can you explain to me how that concept differs from traditional privacy approaches and what implications it has for marketers aiming to balance personalization, which we know works, with
Yeah.
consumer trust?
Yeah. So the way that we really think about it is the aspect of performance really is, when you think about it, it's like performance marketers are really looking for certain outcomes. And I think one
Mhm.
of the big themes that we really heard this year at the new fronts and the upfronts was, everyone is building towards predetermined outcomes that a business may be looking for. And how do you actually piece together the right components to help you drive whatever that outcome may be? Is it engagement? Is it attention? Is it foot traffic? Right? Is it an install? Everyone wants their hardworking media dollars now to have some type of KPI attached to it, right? Performance.
Yeah.
And so when we think about privacy, it's not just around the like, great, just gather as many emails as you can. Everything applies to the privacy policy. No, we want to help anyone that is thinking about collecting and using consumer data in a way that they're tuning the experiences to get the right permissions for those types of outcomes they're really looking for. And so we trademarked that term like 3 years ago, because that was the original notion of why we wanted to build consent in the first place. It was around
Mhm.
like, businesses have the power to have a phenomenal relationship with their fan, with their end consumer at the end of the day here. And if you tune that relationship in the right way and have a great kind of permission based data structure with them, it's going to be, yield massive benefits known as like LTV, lifetime
Yeah.
value with that fan or that consumer. And that to me is what performance means. It's not just like, boom, an impression was served to them, job done, right? It should be no, we had that relationship with Ben for 12 years, right? Ben is a super spender with Nike. He spent in that time period $15,000 in 12 years, right? Give or take.
Yeah.
I've got four boys, right? Myself, and I'm a sneakerhead as well. Like I'm like, that's probably accurate. And so at the end of the day, like that's a super fan, right? So how do we identify that 1 or 2% that are super fans and grow that? That
Yeah.
comes with really minute data signals that I can attach right to my identity structure of me or to you to start understanding those behavioral contextual nuances, the little permissions that we can get over time through that balanced relationship, that will drive that performance that you're looking for. And so I think we're looking at a great infrastructure change happen in the privacy advertising marketing industry, and I think we're also seeing that layering in of those performance strategies and metrics and data points coming into play here that then help build the products to then everyone getting up on the main stage and talking about their outcome and engagement products or interactive products. It's all around collecting those signals, right, to be able to deliver something more personalized for that
Yeah.
super fan.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk that privacy was going to hinder performance. And actually, I think what we talk a lot about at InfoSum is that privacy can actually drive performance because it
Yeah.
forces you to do things the right way. It forces you to be more precise, more thoughtful in what you're doing. And that's just part of the journey I think we're going on as an industry, and we move at such a quick rate. As you look ahead, what trends do you foresee in the data privacy space, and how, I guess, is Precise preparing to address those kind of future challenges I'm sure are on their way?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot, and I kind of mentioned a little bit just now on the identity layer itself, and we're
Right.
seeing a lot of trends towards building that construct around your identity layer in which you have real proof of provenance and different attributes that sit on an individual. We call it an individual verified credential, right?
Right.
So at Precise, we're building and helping companies not only map, what first party data do you have, but also what unique signals can you apply to it, and then bring it to a verified credential state so that you can see and understand its performance over time. Right.
Right.
So you're sharing it with different partners, you're using it to do activation on the advertising side. You're working with marketing partners. At the end of the day, we're going to reach a saturation point where in the US market, like there's only so many emails, right? And only
Right.
so many IP addresses that you're going to get to the what makes those things unique coming from a different data contributor or from a different, from Warner Media to Fox. They
Mm.
are actually a bad example. From NBC, right, to Fox, they both have football. They're both fans of NFL, right? My email is going to be at both sides of that equation with both of those publishers. What is it that Fox has with me and my relationship with them that makes my relationship unique to Fox
Yeah.
versus to NBC? What are the other shows that I'm watching? The things that I'm, playing with in their games or buying their merch or whatever it may be. Those are the unique things that need to sit at that kind of data layer aspect of identity and have the right permissions so that when Fox goes to market, they can say, hey, the cohorts of people like Jesse, we can command XYZ type of CPM because of these unique attributes that make them the super fan to us. Um, that's the trend I see really happening now. And then obviously, the power of, AI infrastructure to be able to understand that nuance, right? And be able to activate against that nuance. The AI Act, on a global level is powerful. And to be
Yeah.
able to say and quickly know and understand, do I have the permissions to use all these deep context and insights around the PII I have of Jesse? Yes, amazing. Here is a time, date, stamp record of that permission and that consent. Awesome. Now I can go activate for my business outcomes. That's the next phase that we're super excited about, and we're helping brands enable as part of their strategies.
Yeah, and obviously it wouldn't be a podcast in 2025 if we didn't talk AI. It is the
Yeah,
subject of,
totally.
of endless events and endless podcasts, and rightly so. It's incredibly important. It's having a massive impact and a shift in our industry. How is Precise leveraging AI to enhance privacy solutions? And then what benefits do you think that brings to both businesses, but also, and probably more importantly, for consumers?
Yeah. So I'll answer that a couple ways. For consumers, we are applying a lot from the kind of traditional user experience layer side of us working with brands on what is your strategy for actually obtaining consents in the first place. A lot of multivariant, not only creative testing but also copy testing. Right. That example I gave of the 15% versus the $15 off or 25%, whatever it was. That going at scale across your segments and your cohorts in real time to dynamically update those things whenever you are asked to share your data. How do we integrate into that endpoint with the consumer to make the right decisions based on your consumer journey? Right, tying it all into your CDP, your DMP, right, your Snowflake or Databricks instance, and being able to instantaneously identify, oh, we actually have a log and record on Jesse's previously predisposition, big word there. We might want to edit that bad boy out. Aspects into how I decide what I say yes to in the future. So we're applying different AI tools and methodologies in regards to that dynamic kind of experience layer. On the other side, on the back end side, with a lot of our kind of federated queries and machine learning algorithms that go out into our federated collaboration network, right? So again, we believe in the world, as does I believe InfoSum, of federated collaboration is really the only way to operate in an always on environment, right? So it's no longer just around like, oh, it's a data clean room and it's a one and done type of an atmosphere here. No, we're building an ecosystem of an always on federated collaboration ecosystem in which at any point in time you can query right into that network. And Precise is built that way from the start. We're working on it for the last 18 months or so, and that has a profound, impact in regards to the speed by which you can go out there and build cohorts or segments, understand and get into the verified credential or that proof of provenance ledger to really understand what permissions do I have for this query coming across right now. Amazing. I've got 17.5 million total possible partners in our ecosystem that match that query. And that can't be done right by the traditional data science team and process. And I think right now we're just scratching the surface, right, of the power and speed by which we can make and understand those types of queries and decisions. And then eventually the return path data that comes back from that, right? How do you then apply real-time optimization? How do you apply real-time dynamic multivariant outputs, right, in
Yeah.
a closed loop system? So is a lot of the kind of forward-looking things that we're building out as part of the Precise offering. And so we're again really thinking about it from the consumer aspect and angle side. How do we really optimize the way brands are collecting that permission, that proof of provenance layer, and then how are we actually structuring ways in which we can query and activate it for advertising purposes, marketing purposes, for product purposes, and personalization.
Yeah, I think what's super interesting to me and what's really come out in this conversation that I love is just how, from a precise perspective, and it very much rings true of kind of the way that we build InfoSum, is it's putting the consumer at the heart of everything, and it's being built with privacy by default, the way that InfoSum has as well, which is, that is the future. Privacy is now non-negotiable, and therefore kind of building that in at its core. And I think
Yeah.
that's super exciting for our industry, right? And that, from a podcast perspective, that's what this podcast is all about. It's the people like you who are pioneering those new ways to use data to deliver those better consumer experiences. So when you look to people in the industry, within your network, who would you nominate for me to interview on an upcoming episode of Identity Architects?
Um, I don't know if he's already been on or not. You could probably answer that, but I think Richie Glassberg at Safeguard Privacy would be an awesome conversation. He has he been on?
He hasn't, no. So I'm loving
Oh,
this.
okay. So definitely, I can put you in touch with Richie. First of all, he's an amazing human, right? At the end of the day here, and he has a tenured career that started all on the sales side of building media companies, like super early days of like launching CNN.com, I believe, right? So he is one of probably the, I want to mention his age, right? But one of the oldest people, meaning not his age, but like just in the
In
industry for
tenure.
such a long time, right? In tenure, that he just knows everyone. He's also, again, like I said, an amazing human. But with Safeguard Privacy, he is privacy by default in regards to how he thinks about every business being enabled to understand the nuance of the law and how it needs to basically be applied to how vendors and clients and partners operate. And he's worked with a whole team of phenomenal lawyers to go in there and interpret all these changing legislative laws and impacts on a global scale. How do you standardize a system by which you can easily get onboarded through his platform, and receive a certification to show you that you meet muster? Right,
Yeah.
of not only his company's point of view, but they've partnered with the IAB and have become the IAB diligence platform provider of choice. And so I think he's got a really good perspective, not just on advertising, but marketing in general, from all walks of life, from insurance and fintech, financial services, all the way up into obviously media companies and marketing firms and ad tech firms. And he's also, a little bit of a jaded conversation too, in which he has the battle scars and he likes to talk about them, which is always fun to hear. But it also influences his passion, right, for why he's doing what he's doing now.
I love that. We will definitely reach out and try and get him on the podcast. I agree. I think that'd be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Jesse, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. It's been super interesting to learn more about you, super interesting to learn more about all that you're doing. I appreciate any company like yourselves that are truly trying to drive our industry to a more privacy first, privacy by default ecosystem. We all know that's where we're heading. So companies like yours and people like you are incredibly important to that.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the time, Ben. This has been awesome. I really appreciate all the conversations we've had, and let's do it again sometime.
Thanks again to Jesse for being on the podcast. It was great to hear about all the work that Jesse and Precise are putting into improving the consumer experience as it relates to their privacy and their control. All that's left for me to do is to remind you to hit that subscribe button to know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But until then, thanks for listening.